Okay, who's there? Oh, hey, it's you guys. Great. I was just thinking about you. My name's Tom, Moto-Resto LLC here in Bradenton, Florida, if you didn't already know that. And I'm on my knees today because, well, I don't really know why I'm on my knees, except it feels good. I'm going to start working on the, that didn't come out good, did it, guys? I'm going to start working on the Concours 14 fork seal repair. And I don't remember when I mentioned this, but I mentioned that I had a leak in fork seal. We'll go over that really quick again. I'll do a quick clip of that issue because I haven't touched it since it came home. And then we'll do one of them. I'm not going to show both on camera, and then we'll move on from there. I'm going to go over the tool that I'm going to use for it, which is a modified universal fork spring compressor tool from Traxion Dynamics. And you'll see what I mean when I get into the modified part. I haven't finished modifying yet. I actually have to pull the wheel off and get a size of the bore on the bottom of these forks where the axle goes through, the front axle, in order to complete that. And this will all become clear once I get to that point. As far as the video content goes, I'm going to do my best, but I've been dealing with a really nasty bronchitis, not COVID related, luckily. I did go to a doc-in-the-box walk-in clinic last Sunday and did a test, which was negative. So, and it was the one they have to send out to the lab, so it's fairly accurate. But, my breathing still isn't 100%, and I'm still hacking up green shit. TMI, huh? So basically, I'm going to do the best I can with it, but I wanted to get this job done, and I didn't want to omit filming it because I kind of promised I would, and I'm a man of my word. So I guess that's about it for now. Let's go ahead and take a look at that fork and what the deal is with it right now, and then I'm going to go over and show you the kit in its unmolested form, if you will, how it came out of the box from Traxion. And then we'll go ahead off camera, get the front wheel off, and I'll explain further what I'm going to be doing as far as modifying the tool for my purposes. Here's the leaking fork, untouched since I got back. She's a mess, and I sure hope to hell that all that oil attracting all this grit didn't do any damage to the tube, but we shall soon see. I kind of doubt it. What I had ended up doing is, this is an idea from the guys that I was riding with, is to put a fork diaper on it, which is actually a sock with some cable ties. I ended up going like 4 days with this, riding up there and all the way home. It did a good job. The objective, of course, was to keep it off of the brakes and the brake surface, so it seemed to have worked pretty well. I don't think it pissed out all of the fork oil. I'm going to try measuring both of them and see how much is left in this one. But I'm sure it's substantially lower, but I don't think it's out completely because it's still wet here. That would be pretty detrimental to the bushes in this thing if it was run dry, but I really don't think that's the case. Again, this started leaking on my trip up to Georgia, and it leaked essentially the first day I got there, and so we started riding around. And got a little bit spirited in trail braking and hitting corners and doing the normal stuff we do, and of course, having to hit the brakes every now and then for traffic or what have you. And as soon as these things get exercised a little too much, when they got cracks in the seals, which I didn't realize, or worn out seals dried up. So basically, with it all leaking like this, it was just a matter of time where it's going to have to get done. And I did an inspection of these before I left on this trip, but didn't see it. It wasn't leaking at that time. The other side is not leaking. So anyway, that's where we're at right now on this. So we're going to move on from here. I got to thank Mike and Wayne and James, who were on the trip with me, and they really helped me out a lot on this. Mike's the one that actually saw this when we stopped. We took a break somewhere. I forgot where it was. It's a particular overlook. And we were standing there and talking to a couple locals, actually. And Mike says, "Hey, Tom, your fork is leaking." And I go, "No way." And sure as hell it was. So, Mike, I appreciate you catching that because I absolutely didn't see it. And it could have been really bad if it got worse and started screwing up that brake while we were, flying around those back roads up there. And Wayne, of course, and James, they came up with the idea for the fork diaper because apparently not apparently, on a trip back in June I wasn't able to make because of medical issues. James had on a concourse had the exact same situation happen, and they were way to hell up in West Virginia. So he ended up riding that entire deal up there with a number of fork diapers on there as he went along, and kept changing them, and it made it all the way home and had somebody repair them. So again, I just wanted to say thanks to those guys. It's a team effort when we ride together, not only for safety while we're moving, but it turns out safety when we're stopped too. So just keep that in mind. So again, thanks guys. This is the Traxine Dynamics kind of a universal kit that I purchased from them. Pretty inexpensive, but it's pretty cheap too, to be honest with you, as far as quality. But I think it'll do the job. Now, I don't really know what this is for in a kit for suspension, a piece of emery paper. I have no idea what that would be for, to be honest with you. There'd be no call that I would know of to utilize something like this, but the instructions underneath here, and it doesn't cover anything regarding that. It does cover this, though, and I'll show you in a minute. We'll get to that last. These hex dealios, I'm not sure why they have those either. I mean, I guess they're assuming that the people who buy the kit don't have many tools, but this would be to take out like the hex cap on the bottom of the forks, which would release the cartridge. In this particular case, you can pull them completely apart, which we don't need to do to change seals. And we have a turkey baster with a height gauge. I actually already own a height gauge, but this might come in handy. This is a tub of grease, a little tub rather of grease. And let's take it off with one hand. That's usually something that I'm not too coordinated with, but we'll try. You see, that's probably silicone grease, which is what I would use anyway. And that's to lubricate the seals when you go to put them back on. There's some guidance on that in the service data for this particular job. All right, so there's where the important parts are. In order to compress the spring in this, all right, there is let me turn the instructions over and kind of show you. It's a generic picture, but it works. There is a collar, and there's a stopper and a collar, and in that collar there's two holes that are 180 degrees apart, which is what this is for. So what you end up doing with this is you slip it over, because it's big enough to go over the whole thing from the top here, as you can see. Then you tighten these guys up into those holes. And then what they're showing is a second person push down, which you can certainly do. And you expose the jam nut that's underneath there from the top cap to the rod. And you slip this tool in, and that locks that down to a point where you can actually release the jam nut. Now, once you release the jam nut, then you can take this top part off. And once you get the top part off, you carefully put pressure back on it. Remember, the bottom of the fork would be stationary at this point. The actual lower, the part that would be through your front wheels and the axle. And so that is the stationary part, and this would be the movable part. So you reload this as far as the spring goes, pull this out, and then lift this up, and of course then the tension is off, and you can continue your disassembly, because now this guy is going to be all out of the way. All right, so I'm not really liking this because you need, number one, a second person, and number two, if you do it like some guys have done on other YouTube videos, which I'm not faulting them, necessity is the mother of invention, or maybe necessity is a mother, I don't know. But what they ended up doing is either making one of these out of a big piece of PVC and some bolts that they tapered at the end, I assume, or one of these kits themselves. And what they did was they slipped it over and put a bar through underneath where the axle would be in that lower part of the fork, and then used ratchet straps to compress it. I think that's okay, but the thing is, it's very awkward and frankly a little bit hokey, in my opinion. I think there's a better way. And, I got a lathe and a milling machine. I can make just about anything. I would love to make one of these actual tools. And if you go into the factory service information for the Concours and pull up the part number, it's basically a split block. And I'll try to interject a good picture of it here that I actually found on, I think it's the CMSNL, or one of the parts sources, parts suppliers abroad in Europe. They had a really good picture of it because they sell it. It's a factory special tool. And that is, again, a split with a couple of cap bolts that go through, and you essentially grab instead of grabbing that collar in the holes, you grab the stopper piece, which is above it, and it's very special as far as the angles, and it's not a round hole. It's essentially an oblong hole. It's kind of hard to explain, but you'll see when I put a picture in here about that. And I could certainly make one of those, and I might just do that someday. I'm going to make the measurements, or take the measurements rather, while this is apart, to know what size I would need to make that. And I got some stock, and one day I just might make a drawing and then just bang it out, and then I'll have one to use. The factory kit utilizes that block which clamps up top here, registers itself on this collar that these things would normally go into if you're using this aftermarket tool to keep it, from going back and forth. And then it has like threaded rod in a couple of different pieces with connector pieces, threaded connectors basically. And you build this. You build it from the bottom up to the top, and you use the threaded rod with some nuts to pull down, so it essentially would pull the tension down evenly. And instead of doing it manually, that's how that would work. So I'm going to make a hybrid of that. You should be able to see now pretty well, and I have both hands available, which is always good, considering I'm about as coordinated as a one-legged cat trying to take a piss on a frozen lake. What I did was I went down to Metal Supermarket this morning in Sarasota and picked up some 1x1, I don't know, a foot or two of it from their cutoff, spot where they put their cutoff pieces. And what I'm doing with this is I'm making essentially a modified version of what I explained before on the factory tool that uses some sort of threaded rod to compress the spring. And I'm going to use this tool for this, but I need a way to put threaded rod on this because I'm not going to use that strap method. So I took this, cut it into 4-inch sections. I faced off each end in the mill, and then I chucked it in the 4-jaw and just got a rough center pretty much. And I shot a drill through 2 inches. I just a little bit bigger than whatever this is. This is about 13 millimeter. That's what it was. I used a 13 millimeter drill, and then bored it out a little bit bigger because the knurling makes it a little bit, larger diameter. And so the point here is to get this to slip over like that. And then I drilled and tapped for a 1/4-28 grub screw, and you can just put that down like that. And then the same over here. And tighten up your grub screw. That way they won't move laterally. This way it doesn't really matter, because once I get this thing put into place and I slide these on and the threaded rod goes through, it's not going to go anywhere anyway. So that's going to be the top part of it. So the threaded rod will go down through here, and on the top we'll have nuts and washers. So this will be the business end, and we're actually going to pull down and put some torque on this thing to actually push the spring down to access that jam that I was explaining before, and put this in, of course. I think that's going to be a much sounder way to do it. I'm also going to figure out a way to be able to hold this fork in place instead of where you see other people in videos, they're balancing it between their knees or something, because it's very awkward to hold. But I have an idea how I can do that as well. So again, this is the top part. So what I need to do is, again, off camera, I need to pull off that front end. And then when we come back, I'll show you what we're going to do with the bottom part, because I need access to that bore in there to see what size I need to make something to be essentially a mate to this, but on the bottom end where the threaded rod is going to attach. Here we go. I forgot to mention before, I'm not going to cover taking the forks out, how to do that, or how to take the wheels off or anything on this bike. Just refer to the service data and you can figure that out. I know there's going to be some difficulty in getting up in there to get the lower fork leg pinch bolts out, but I'll figure out a way. So anyway, let me show you what we're talking about as far as needing to know the size here. That's in Imperial, it's about 1.25 inches. I got a 1-inch piece that'll go through there, so that'll be fine. I don't like the fact that it's so far, so much different as far as diameter, but I had no idea what size that was. I was going to pick up some 1.25 inch round bar stock from Metal Supermarket, but they didn't have any in the cutoff area. I was going to grab 1 inch and 1.25. 1.25 would be perfect, and I'd turn that down if I need to go nicely through that hole. But I guess it's not going to matter, because again, it just has to go through and have a place for the 2 threaded rods to go through. So it's I'll show you what I mean here in a second. Now I have no idea how far these holes will be apart when this is in place. I'm guessing it'll be about there. So I measured it's about 15 inches. So I'm going to I'm sorry, about 13 inches rather. I'm going to make a 15-inch long piece of bar stock, and then drill and tap. I'll do that off camera for the 7/16/14 of the threaded rod, because I want that to thread in there for a little bit more control, and I can use a nut to lock it if I want to. So that you can see kind of where I'm going with this. This goes across the top. The bar I'm talking about goes across the bottom. The threaded rod goes between and provides that compression. Okay, this is the piece that you just saw me making a couple little clips, and a lot more complicated than it had to be, but I'm going to explain why here in a second. I have this laid out on the floor. I'll match this up to it in a moment, and you'll see, you get a really good understanding of what I'm talking about. So this goes through only one of these forks at a time, of course, and I'm still trying to figure out how I'm going to set this up where it's not a real pain in the ass to handle, where it's awkward and balancing it between my knees and things like that. I think I got an idea, but anyway, I digress. So this goes between here. This is going to end up pulling up against there. Threaded rod comes down from the top piece, and we can squeeze that thing down, and then have a lot of control over it, because we're using the nuts and the washers to push it down instead of ratchet straps, which, you know, are flimsy and doesn't work right. And yeah, so that's kind of where I'm going with this. Now, let me show you it really quick, and then we're going to close out for the day and then pick this up tomorrow because it's getting late in the day. So here's the top piece. You saw that before, and there's the blocks, and there's 2 nuts laying there. There's 2 more in another place, but that's another matter. There's a joke there somewhere. And so this piece, you know, pretends down through the threaded rod through the holes here. And so we're going to put nuts on the bottom. I originally said I was going to thread this, but I decided not to. That's kind of, it'll be counterproductive in the end, because I do need a little bit of play here. I just don't know how wide this is going to be. I may even drill these out even bigger, but now I know that they're parallel, and I can just run a hand drill through if I need to. But so this will go there, this will go there, and we'd be able to, as I said before, we'll be able to squeeze it down. I do not know exactly how long these threaded rod needs to be. It's going to not matter if they're too long, because we'll just run the nuts down to where we need to run them. And here's the question that may be going through some people's heads right here. I'm going through an awful lot here to build a rig here to do, you know, my forks. Well, it's really not what I'm doing it for. As you know, I do this as a business, and I have never tackled a set of upside down or upright, inverted rather, forks, but I'd like to start. So if I have an outfit that I build that'll work on this, it's likely it's going to work on pretty much any of these inverteds. And since it's a universal kit, if it has the same type of setup inside there with the holes, and you'll see that in next sections of this video where those 2 pieces, you know, those screws go into to grab, we can do this. You know, we can use it for other you know, jobs. So that's why I'm going through all this. That's why I'm making a mess on the mill, and my second one today actually, and that's why I'm making all this stuff the way I'm making it, because I want to be able to put this in a special tool section when I'm not using it, and then pull it out and have it available if I have a bike come in with these upside down or inverted forks that need fork seal work. All right, so that's why I'm going through all this. So I think that's about it for now. It's getting a little late in the day, so we'll close it out for now. And when we pick up again, it'll be tomorrow or another day, whatever that may be, and we'll go ahead and snatch that fork off, the one that's been leaking. We'll set this up and see how it works. Take that fork apart, we'll follow the service data, and we'll replace the fork seals. Put it back together, and then we'll close the video out. So until then, I will catch you then. Okay, it's the next day. Man, we just got a couple hours of solid rain. I bet you we got 3.5 inches of rain, and it is humid as a you-know-what. I'm dying here, but I want to get this done. So we got the right fork out. Wasn't hard at all. You can get at these pretty easy, actually. This is a 6 mil Allen, or hex, internal hex, and down there are two 8mm bolts with 10mm heads. So there they are. That's an M8125 with a 10mm head. Not too hard to get at all. What in the hell is this? Well, I shall tell you what the hell this is. This is my rig that I'm experimenting with. Now, I mentioned earlier a number of times that I want something that I don't have to fight with, and I want this thing supported. So it's upright, and I can work on it, and then take it out as needed, and, I can even leave the bottom piece in while I turn it upside down, drain the oil, whatever else I'm doing to it, okay? But I refuse to have this balancing between my knees and, doing it kind of shade tree mechanic style. Although this is kind of hokey as well, I think. But this is the idea I came up with. Now, you saw me make this 1 inch, and I mentioned earlier in the video that idea, that bore is about 1.25 inches. Whatever the metric equivalent of that is, I do not know. So I machined a collar this morning, and I split it. And so what I'm just using is the cinch bolts down at the bottom of the fork to hold that in, and she's pretty steady. So what's holding this all together, of course, is the Machinist Vise. As you can see, this is my 6 inch. It's an import. So is my other one, but I originally got a 6 inch vise for my mill when I got it, and realized that this is kind of big for that. So I ordered a 4 inch, and that's what you see on the mill right now whenever I do any work on video on that machine tool. So I figured this thing would be great to hold this. That vise got to weigh 60 pounds. I mean, it is heavy as hell. So there ain't no way. What does this thing weigh? About 8-10 pounds, this whole fork or something? It's actually pretty light. And when you clamp it in here, it holds it just fine. You can put a tremendous amount of clamping force on one of them Acme screws there, or whatever the thread style is on it, the pitch, and clamp it up. So I inserted the rod, of course, on that side, and it's simply laying in that space between, you can see there, between the rails of the vise. So when we pull up on it, it'll lock in because there's a nut. And it makes me think now that I really should have gone with my initial design and drilled and tapped, because then I can just screw them in and then it'll be fine. But this will work. So when you take these things off of just about any bike, and I do this when I work on them, well, I do it sometimes when I work on the standards, is you might want to crack the top cap here, which is, I think, I don't know, 19 or 22 millimeter, while it's clamped in the triple tree, because it's fixed and it's easier to do, but it's very hard to get at because of my helibars. So I do that sometimes, but most of the time I just ugga-dug it with the air impact just to break it loose, which is what I'll do here. And then we'll take it from there. I'm going to go through the service data now and show you exactly what you need to do on this as far as a Concours. In the way they have it listed in the Concours 14 service manual is actually pretty stupid in my opinion. The fork disassembly is not listed under fork disassembly. It's listed under oil change, which I guess you got to do the same thing. So I printed that whole section out starting at oil change, because it's the only part that actually tells you how to do what we're about to do. So we already have the fork removed. We're going to do the top plug here in a minute. This is installing the special tool. Insert the holder bar, set the holder bar and compression shafts. This is the picture I showed you early in the video of the assembled unit if you're using a factory tool. And we do the compression, to screw in nuts nuts. And holding the rod wrench, holding the piston rod nut with a wrench, remove the top plug. So essentially it's a threaded rod going into that top plug, they call it, which is B, all right? And you're just going to hold it with the same one you unscrewed it with, basically, and then you use the wrench to, break that jam nut loose. and then you remove that whole assembly, and you can see there's the collar I'm going to be attacking with the 2 holes in it. And then we drain the fork oil into a suitable container, and then this just goes right into refilling it. We'll skip over to the further disassembly when we get to that point. So I'll put you in the stand and let's get to that point. Alright, now that's loose. So let's take a look at what we got. Oh, you know what? I got to take off my diaper. I can't pull my pants down because the diaper's still there. Here's the 2 holes I was talking about. There's one there, one there. Remember that factory tool that I put the picture in on I was describing before, and you saw the shape of this. This is called a stopper. It's either this or actually that's the stopper. A little tang right there. And the factory tool, when it goes on each side, as you can see from the photo of it, it has a relief. It's not just a circle that clamps around it in that spot. And that relief is for this stopper. So that thing would go around, and it would be, the round part would contact here, and its mating side on the other side, and then it would be the relief for the stopper. So that's why it's shaped that way. Right now I'm going to go ahead and get this set up where we can go ahead and compress this. I'll get the socket on a ratchet, and we'll break that nut loose like the instructions in the service manual say. Put that on first. Doesn't really matter what angle it's at. Put that on first. Put this up top. Come on, jumbo pain in the ass. Put this down there, get it down. Now we can screw it in, and this is going to turn inside of it because, I haven't cinched down those grub screws yet. And snug them up. Snugs that up so they're not going to walk on us. I know these don't need to be this long, but for this purpose it's rather tedious having to go all the way down like that. I guess I could build some spacers to put on top of this, but I think that'd be a little overboard. And when do I ever go overboard on stuff? Name one time. Getting there. Yeah, see, there we go. We're getting up to it now where we can slip that dealio in, that tool, and then hold that up, and then we'll get the thing off. But I'm going to keep going down to where I've seen the other people do, where they bring it down to the edge of that tube, basically. Alright, here we go. Now we'll show you what it looks like. So we have the tool in. This is the nut we got to hold. We got to hold it here. We got to hold it here. This is essentially the nut itself, this whole assembly down here with the threads. And this is the jam nut. I believe there's some sort of a measurement you have to make when you put this back together. I don't remember where the measurement is taken from, but I will look in the service data. And it has to be set up correctly. I don't really see any way to make any measurement on that right now. I know there's a tube inside here that will be taken out, I think. Yeah, we will, because that's part of the dampening actuator assembly for this dampener up here, which pushes down on some sort of a valve assembly down in there to make the dampening work. So let's go ahead and get probably a 13, 14. Put that socket back on, we'll take this off. Piece of cake. This guy comes off. Alright. We'll take this tube out I was referencing before. Alright, so now we need to do is there's a special tool that comes with this now. And I probably already have one of these, to be honest with you, but you can use a bolt with a nut on it. Because now you have to grab this tube, this inner tube. We're going to need to do that later as well. Now we got to do is we got to release our tube, or tool rather, not tube. And now we can back the spring off. So I'm going to do that off camera. You don't need to see that. We'll take this out of the way too, which is the stopper cap. And I'll back it all off camera. You don't need to see that again. It's pretty stupid. And then we'll take it from there and dump the oil out and see what we got. Alright, so I learned a couple things. And I'll go over that in a summary of the tool here because I'm going to have to make some corrections. But let's move on. So here's the spacer, the one we just pushed down on. You can see it's got a cutout so it registers on the spring. The spring is right there. And so it's actually pretty simple when it comes to that kind of setup. Let's pull this up here. I'm going to leave that hooked up for now. Alright, so where's my next operation? Let's see. We remove the fork spring. Yeah, collar, washer, fork spring. Then we drain it. Alright, so that's no problem. We'll do that right now. The collar and the washer, that's what I call the stopper. That stopper washer. Come on, jeez. Alright, now I think there's an orientation for this spring. I'm not 100% sure though. Looks same, you know, it doesn't look like a progressive, but what we'll do is I'll stand it upright in the position it came out of, just in case. Alright, now we're going to break down this setup, and the rest of it, we'll go ahead and drain the oil out. I'm not going to take the bar out of the bottom, I'm just going to take the rods out, but you get what I mean, and then we'll move over and see what kind of volume we have left in here, okay? We'll measure it. Alright, I'm pretty sure the outer tube just comes off. That's where the seal is. Whoa, that's a mess. I think that's what they meant by saying, don't take that off until you drain the oil, or it'll be a big mess. Well, there you go. Just comes off. That's what it is. Oh, man. To see things squirt like that, jeez, that brings back memories. Well, we lost some volume, didn't we? Well, that's got quite a bit left in it. Yeah. Make sure you pump it. Alright, we're going to separate the outer tube from the inner tube now, since we've got most of the oil out. Here's your outer tube. That's where your seal is. Here's the inner tube. You can see that right there. Okay. That's where the holes are. That's for dampening, most likely, where the oil path can go under compression and, of course, under extension. Pretty cool. Alright, so, if you're using the factory service data, they don't mention taking the outer tube from the inner tube because this is, remember, a fork oil change section, which is the only one that covers the disassembly part of spring compression and things like that. So you can see right now it goes from, you know, draining it to refilling it, which is why that outer tube is still in there. I just read it somewhere where you're not supposed to take that out, and that gave us our little our climactic squirt episode before. Alright, so front fork, blah, blah, blah. We're going to refer back to that when we get to that point as far as putting the fluid back in. Alright, so we're going to skip over to page 1315, and we're going to go to right here, which is separate the outer tube from the inner tube, pull out the dust seal, remove the retaining ring from the inside of the outer tube, and remove the oil seal and washer. So that's not unusual. That's pretty much like you'd see from a regular upright, where you have the dust seal, then you have the clip, then you have the main seal and a washer. Sometimes the washer's on top, sometimes down below. It depends on manufacturer, but that's not unusual at all. Okay, so, and the rest of this up here, of course, is part of the assembly where you're putting it back together, and then right down here is when you're doing the entire disassembly, which is essentially what we're doing part of. We're not going to take the entire thing apart, but you know, as far as the lower cartridge and stuff, we're going to just deal with the seals. Moved over by the lathe where I have a nice little vise here. So over here we have it in the soft jaws. This is typically the setup I have in the other vise when I do an upright standard. I have the lower part of the fork in the soft jaws, and then do the entire work as far as disassembly and taking it apart there. And then do pouring out, take it all the rest of the way apart, even the lower cap bolt after I pour it out, and then take everything and give it a thorough cleaning. We'll probably clean the inside of this tube with brake clean once the seals are out, and then the other side we're just going to leave. That fluid really doesn't look all that bad. I wouldn't think it would be, except for the fact that it's been piston fluid and attracting dirt, but if the dirt didn't make it back up through these seals, which doesn't really feel like it did, this dust seal is the main #1 barrier for that, and this is all cracked. As you can see, there is damage to it from age. There's a crack right there. And again, I did not notice these when I had inspected it before the trip. I don't have the proper seal extracting tool, I'll admit that. We're not going to save the seal anyway. Whenever you're prying on something like this, here's just a little bit of food for thought. You have to consider if there's a lip in the material that this seal is placed into before you start prying on it. So if I was to just go ape shit on this and go in here, there may be a lip for this to capture, and I don't want to damage that aluminum. So basically, I'm just going to go in here and kind of get it, somewhat situated where I can get it. And there it goes. See, I was pulling on both seals, which is why it wouldn't come out. Now, these clips that are inside here that hold the main seal in, these are real typical. I mean, this is the ones you're going to see. I mean, I have dozens of these that I've kept for various purposes because it's nice hard. It's a nice high carbon steel. Let's see. Before I go on, this would be your upper bushing right here. There appears to be no lower bushing like on the tube. Some of them have it, some of them don't. If this thing had been completely out of oil and or had drug up a bunch of shit, that bushing would be suspect. So, if it looks like it's trash, it probably is. I believe they are available. I thought I saw it in the parts fish, but maybe not. So I'm going to see how I can get this thing out and move on from there. Alright, I forgot to turn the camera on here, but this is pretty easy to get out. Here's the seal in its position when it was in there. And all I did was take Big Bertha. This is Big Bertha I'd like to introduce you. And I took Big Bertha and I put a piece of aluminium along the edge here. Just captured underneath there and just gave it a good push, and it came right out. So we're good there. That's all you got to do. Just be careful with the edge of the fork tube here. Now there's a washer underneath here. So from the bottom to the top, the order is washer, main seal, clip, or ring, whatever you want to call it, and then a dust seal. As far as volume goes, I think we'll go with about 500 mLs. The little bit that spilled out probably make up, or squirted out, just comes off. We'll make up for that little bit below the 500 here. So so between 475 and 500 right now. Obviously I don't have everything out of it, but it's the best I can do to get it out, and it doesn't look too bad. I mean, I've seen a heck of a lot worse. Usually this stuff stinks real bad too. Let me see how it tastes. Pretty good. So, it's it's not bad. And I've taken these out of bikes before where it stinks so bad that you got to put exhaust fans on because it's just horrible. It's almost like it's turned, like something organic. So, yeah, not too bad. So we'll go with that. We'll go with half a liter then. And I don't remember what the volume is. We'll go look that up later. But just remember, I'm thinking we got 500 mLs out of that one side, the one that was leaking. All right, so here we are with Reassembly, and I got everything cleaned up, ready to go. And I just wanted to cover this is on 13-16 in a service manual under front fork assembly. Try saying that 3 times fast. Okay, so remember, this assumes that you took out the piston tube, I guess that's what they're calling, or the cylinder tube, which is the unit that, you said unit, that actually goes down to that cartridge assembly and goes down through that cap bolt on the bottom and holds all that in. And so this is essentially what keeps this from coming out all the way. What keeps it, this is the part that won't allow this thing to go too far out under full extension. So if you did a wheelie, the front wheel would extend all the way. And you can feel this right here. You see that? It's a springy thing. That's because there's a spring inside there, which is a damper spring, which is absolutely not atypical. An upright would have the exact same thing on part which is called a piston. There's a piston and a piston ring inside those, which there may be one in here, I don't know. But we didn't take all that out, so we don't have to worry about that. What we do have to do is we have to pay attention to the order of operations on how to install these seals. So first thing we do, we're going to go down here. Insert the inner tube into the outer tube, okay? But you have to do this first. So we're going to install these seals and the dust, the dust seal, the retaining ring, the oil seal, and the washer over this tube. Then we're going to install the outer tube. Then we're going to flip it over. We're going to use a seal driver and put it in. Now the reason why I'm bringing this up is because if you think about it, technically, I mean, you could put all this stuff in that outer tube. There's nothing preventing this outer tube here from coming off, strangely satisfying, when this is taken apart up here. This will just slip off. We saw that before. But I think this is the reason why they say that. When you seat these oil seals, the way it's engineered, the actual seal engineering as far as how it grabs this hydraulic shaft really it's hydraulic tube, is factored in as far as the circumferential pressure of that seal being put into the area that it lives, in this case into the outer tube. So we could certainly put that in, but we'd probably damage it going in through this edge right here. This is a pretty sharp edge. We're going to take some care getting that over anyway. In fact, I might just put a piece of tape up here, let it overhang, then slide everything down, then take the tape off, and then put the outer tube on. So you want to take all measures, possible or practical to protect this edge and the seal from that edge. That's essentially why I think they want you to do it that way. So this is not unlike an upright. In an upright, what we would do is we would put the inner tube in the outer tube, and just like it says to do on this, then we would run the seals down and run the dust seal and all that crap down, and the clips and whatever else, and we would drive that in with the tube inside the other tube, the inner and outer tube. No different on these, again, except it's just upside down, it's flipped over. So I just wanted to cover that real quick because, again, you could probably do that, just put it in the outer tube, but you're going to damage that seal going in through here, possibly. So we're just going to follow the service data and eliminate any headaches, because I only have 2 sets of seals. I don't recommend using aftermarket seals on things like this unless you absolutely have to. These are directly from the mothership via a part supplier. Here's your dust seal. Part number in the dust seal is right there. And this also says seal oil fork outer tube. So it's a seal outer and an oil seal, but they call it kind of the same thing. Part number on the actual oil seal is that. And so that's what we're going to be putting on because I like to use the OEM parts on suspension when all possible. I have used aftermarket when I have to, but in this case, OEM. Okay, so I got a little tape up there just to help me out. And since we're dealing with this upside down, we have to do it in the reverse order that you would, typically do it if it was right side up. So the first thing that goes on would be your dust seal. And so we'll carefully get that on. I put a little seal schmoo, that grease on this, and we'll just work that over nice and easy. Next thing that's going to go on is our clip, because that's going to hold the oil seal in place. Got that nice and clean. Next thing that goes on is the actual oil seal itself. Make sure you got it in the right orientation, because remember, it's upside down. So it's going to be going up into there. This is the leading edge of it, the sealing edge, so it goes this way, so up into the other side. And then you can see from the photo, the last thing to go on from there is going to be that washer. Now remember the orientation of that washer. We want the flat side, I think this is the way it goes at least. The flat side's got to go up into the board. Doesn't make any sense to do it this way, to have that sharp side down on the seal. So I think that's the way this has got to go. I should have paid more attention to it when I took it out, but I really don't think it's going to make a hill of beans worth of difference. So that's going to be fine. Take the tape off. I'll go ahead and get this broke down, and we'll flip it over and we'll do our dealio. So stand by. I went back over to the vise. This is very, very awkward to try to hold and do. If it was a second person, you could do it. So I have that piece clamped up in the vise upside down. I got everything ready to go so that, the seal's lined up pretty good, starting to go. We can start that into the outer bore. The bore for the dust seal is larger, so this starts kind of automatically. Then you have your seal driver part that sticks down in there. We'll get this clip out of the way if it decides to cooperate, and then we put this driver on. Now you'll know that that's seated by the way it sounded. Got thud thud, because I was getting in direct contact with it sitting on a towel down on the floor there. And so, all the thing is, you'll see that the groove is well exposed for this clip here. So we're just going to drop the clip in with a screwdriver, pop it in place, and we'll double check our work. There we go. You hear it click right in there, no problemo. So I had a little bit of fork oil on this too because of the bushing. I wanted to lubricate the bush a little bit, but it still had a little bit of that grease too. So it's going to be fine. So we'll just keep wiping this off before I run this seal up and down very much, but you can see it feels nice, not binding, it's not, the way it's supposed to be this way. About that much firmness. But you can see that lip right in here would be difficult to insert this way onto the tube with this kind of pressure on the outside of it, because it wants to fold this inwards, that lip in, which is how it helps to seal. So you can see why they want you to put the tube in first after you slip everything over the tube, and then seat your seals and everything. All right, dust seals right here. A lot of times you don't even need a knocker or anything like that to put this in. Sometimes they just go right in like this. They're not very tight like a pressure fit or a force fit or a press fit. There's a little lip there that helps catch that, and voila, that's it. I made some engineering changes to my rig, which I'll show you here in a minute. I think it'll make it easier and better for the thing to work. But let's talk about fork oil and the fork oil level. Now, I showed you before it came about 450 mLs out, and I'm sure there's maybe 5 or 10 left in there, maybe, if that. Service manual calls for 5W. It says KBA 01 KLH 15-10 or equivalent. Then it says SAE 5W. Okay, so some guys will change that to 7 or 10 or 15, but I'm going to keep it to the 5, mainly because I have 5 in stock. I bought this a while back for a job. Never used it. And this is, it says SS-7, but this is 5W Honda, developed by Showa fork oil. Each side, according to the service manual, when it's a refill, not dry, is 445 mLs approximately. And then we'll do the height gauge check on that from the top of the inner tube. After disassembly and completely dry, it's about 526 plus or minus 4. Let's say we had about 475, 480 in there when we measured it out, maybe 500 tops because of the stuff that spilled. That would be very reasonable. That it may have lost 5 or 10 mLs, if that, from the leak. So we did pretty well, actually. Could have been a lot worse. So that's what we're going to do. We're going to measure out 445 mLs and pour it in. Now the outer tube is pretty much inconsequential right now. It just sits down because the seals are in it. It's going to stay where it's at until we get to that point where we need to move it, which we don't need to for a while. So basically, I'm going to put some fork oil in, 445, pour in, and then we're going to work it. Work it. Remember, this is done without the spring in place. I think the service manual says about 10 times. You do it till the air stops bubbling. And this is not unusual from pumping an upright. When you do that one, you fill the upright through the inner tube, and you start pumping that inner tube to the outer, and that does the same thing because it's moving the tube in relationship to the piston that's in those uprights. Whereas right now, everything's stationary except the piston, and we're moving that. I'm trying to get you in here to show you the oil. I'm probably not going to focus right. You can kind of see it down the bottom there. The standard is 101 millimeter, and it talks about a special tool in the service data, and then in the same breath it says stick a tape measure in if you need to. So I don't think it's all that critical, if they suggest using a damn tape measure. I have this marked off. This is actually a measuring rod for a fork oil level. The bottom of that tape is 100 mLs. So we're going to, not 100, 100 millimeters, not milliliters, sorry. So I'm going way down past that already. As soon as I touch the surface, then, so it's supposed to be all the way up to there. So I need to put some more in now. And of course, without the spring, doesn't take much to bring these up. When you top these things off, you think you need more than you actually do. That volume in there is not all that much once it's filled up. A couple of measurements we have to make sure we're good on right now before we put the rest of this together. The first one is they want the threads that stick out above. Let me zoom you up here a little bit so you can see. The threads that stick up above the of the jam nut, so from the jam nut face to the top of that rod, they want it 12 millimeters, which is 443 thousandths. I think it's just a basic, approximation to make sure you have enough thread engagement. So 443. And we'll just double check that with the depth side of this. All right, so the other measurement you have to be particularly pay attention to is kind of a preset on the cap part, the dampener part that goes in and screws on the top here. That's the whole top of the fork assembly itself. The cap, whatever they're calling it, I don't know. They want you to check the distance. Here's the piece. Okay. From the bottom edge, that would be where the jam nut hits, to the inside. If you see that little slot is the screw head that's in there. Okay. So they want that preset essentially at 13 millimeters or 510 thousandths. So we'll do that too. I think it's just a starting guideline. So that's set where it needs to be. I think it's just a starting point, like a preset thing. I'm not really sure what it is, to be honest with you. Okay, so now we got to get this stuff back together and then put the puller in. It'll just be a reverse of what we did before. So we're going to be putting this guy in, pulling that up, getting the puller set up, pushing it down, and getting that all hooked up and this screwed in. Alrighty, so I got everything in. I took the retainer thingy out, whatever you want to call it, and now I'm just going to back off. I put a new O-ring on the cap because I had gotten them. Why not? Might as well use them if you got them. And this, unfortunately, is a design error, a design problem. I tried to fix this while, before. These holes through the threaded rod, because this thing is bending so much, this thing is a really cheap tool, is angling the blocks so they're binding up on the threads, you see? So I don't think this tool is long for this earth, but it'll work for this job. I'm going to make something much better, maybe even the same design as this, but I'll make it out of steel. This tool is definitely weak. It's probably not designed for how I'm using it, because I'm putting a constant pressure on it. And it's designed for momentary, like a second person pushing down, compressing that spring, somebody else reaching in and shoving that tool in, and then it's on that as far as the tension goes. It's not designed for what I'm using it for. But I don't have a second person, number one, and number two, we can make stuff that's much cooler than that. But, if it works for these two, then I'll just use it as a template maybe to build something a little bit better. A little tweaked. This is the orientation I had it with, this side down, so not too bad. Maybe it's okay, just flexes because it's made out of freaking peanut butter. I don't know. Really, all we got to do now is slide this guy up and get this threaded in. I'll give that a later on, but as far as the fork goes, she is done. This one is done. It's only taken me all day. Of course, I'm actually about a day and a half because I've been building and modifying the tools as I go along. If I was doing a customer job, if I was doing a customer job, I would hope that I would have some sort of a tool set up for it. But, the bottom line is I don't. So let's take a look at it and put some pressure on it. And the orientation is designed. See if this will work. Oh, yeah. Oh, she feels good. Got good dampening rather. Not binding. Oh yeah, I think that's going to be just fine. You going to drive up and down the driveway with your noisy truck anymore? Okay guys, so that's it. One down, one to go. Kind of took the super tramp method, the long way home to get this one done. But I've never done one before, as I said, and I wanted to fiddle with the special tool, make something that's a little more controllable, so I don't need a second person, that I can use it again in the future, and I'm going to machine something better, I can guarantee you, at a later time. So yeah, let me show you the final result, though, a little close up. This is, of course, the business end right here, where the seal meets the pipe. So the tube. So it looks really good. I'm going to have to degrease all this because it's got shmoo on it, but other than that, I think we're good. It looks fine, works good. It'll be no problem whatsoever. So, okay, so we learned a few things from this one, what to do, what not to do, and hopefully it helps you guys out make a decision on how you're going to do them, if you're going to do them yourself, or just farm it out to a shop, have them do it, or what have you. Compared to the standards or the uprights, not the inverted ones, I would say that these are probably maybe just a little trickier, but they're really not that much harder now that I know how to do them. And once I could do the uprights. I've done so many of them like in my sleep. But now that I've done one of these, I'll do the next one. It'll go even quicker. And if I get any more in, then it'll just become pretty much routine, just like the other ones are as well. So speaking of routine, don't forget the routine of going down into the subscribe area and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already done so. Get notified when I put up more content like this. Also, which helps is to like the video and ring the bell for the same reasons. So until next time, just remember, guys, don't just repair, restore. Catch you on the next video.